Hey everybody, welcome to episode 3 of NHL Remember Him. We've done 2 forwards so far. Episode 1 with Derek Roy, episode 2 was Andrew Brunette. So we're going to do a defenseman today, and that defenseman is Tim Gleason. So I remember Tim Gleason obviously very well. He just recently retired from the NHL. He last played in 2015, so he's been out for a couple of years now. But he's certainly a guy that I remember very, very well. I watched him play most of his career. Tim Gleason played 727 games in the NHL, scoring 17 goals, 125 assists for 142 points. In his playoff career, he played 32 career playoff games. He had 1 goal, 5 assists, and 6 points in those games. Gleason was a defensive defenseman. He was a stay-at-home guy. He wasn't an offensive defenseman or a guy that was going to give you a lot of point production from the back end. He was a stay-at-home, take care of your own zone, physical defenseman. Gleason was a first-round pick, 23rd overall in 2001 by the Ottawa Senators, but he never played for Ottawa. He broke into the league in 2003 with the Los Angeles Kings, and he played with the Kings for a couple of seasons from 2003 to 2006. He then went to Carolina, and Carolina is where he spent most of his career. I think when anyone thinks of Tim Gleason, they think of the Carolina Hurricanes, because he played there for a long time and was one of their top 4 defensemen for a long time. He played with the Hurricanes from 2006 all the way until 2013. In 2013-14, he was traded to Toronto for part of the season. After that, he signed back with Carolina for the 14-15 season and then was then traded to Washington that year and went on a playoff run with the Capitals that did not end in a Stanley Cup winning season, but a deep playoff run for the Washington Capitals. So, Gleason, really kind of one of those stay-at-home defensive defensemen who doesn't get a lot of highlight reel time, doesn't get a lot, talked about all that much, isn't on the score sheet a lot, but really was a solid player and a really good player for a long time in the NHL. He wasn't the kind of guy that was going to go to all-star games or, get featured before the game and the pregame show. But he was the kind of guy who was just in your lineup on a nightly basis, kept the puck out of his own net, and played good, solid defense as a number 4 or 5 type defenseman. And he lasted a long time in the NHL, and he had some very good seasons in the NHL. There's a reason Carolina kept him as long as they did, and then he was wanted through trade towards the end of his career by teams looking to make playoff runs. Toronto in 2013-14 trades for him. Washington trades for him for their 14-15 run. He was a solid player, and at that time he was a veteran guy, good in the locker room. He was a leader, and he was a physical guy, not afraid to drop the gloves. He didn't fight all that much. Certainly wasn't an enforcer or anything, or someone I would call a fighter, but he wasn't afraid to drop the gloves. He could do it a few times a year, and he stuck up for his teammates. He had his teammates' backs, and was just one of those defensemen that, you don't think of, when you think of Carolina at that time, Tim Gleason's probably not a name that jumps off the sheet at you. I remember, when Justin Falk came in, and Justin Falk was this young defenseman who made the NHL at a young age and was playing, really good and could produce points. And, everyone's like, Justin Falk's really, this up-and-coming, really good defenseman. Tim Gleason wasn't the kind of guy that garnered that type of attention. Nobody was ranting and raving about Tim Gleason's play. But what he was just a really solid stay-at-home defenseman who really helped his team in any way that he could and did what he thought was best for the team that would help them win games. And he played on some good teams in his career. He played on some very bad teams in his career, but he was always a really solid stay-at-home guy. And the kind of player that's easy to forget about, but you shouldn't be forgotten about. And I think if you're a Carolina Hurricanes fan, you certainly don't forget Tim Gleason. But if you're not, if you're a fan of another team in the league or don't follow Carolina that closely, he's maybe a guy that you don't really think about all that often or know that much about. But he was a very solid player, and you know, he wasn't a point producer defenseman from the back end the way that, you know, especially nowadays we see a lot of young defensemen who come in and are really, you know, putting up 40, 50 points from the back end, and that's not the kind of defenseman Tim Gleason was. That's not the kind of player he was. He was the guy who would finish the season with, you know, I don't know, 12 to 15 points, but play solid in his own end, kill penalties, play in the D zone, play physically, try and play physical against the other team's skill players and stuff like that. He was not, you know, just a solid stay-at-home defenseman, and a guy that I think put together a nice career in the NHL, even though he wasn't the most skilled, he wasn't the best skater, he didn't, you know, have this pure natural talent that you see some of these other players have. He was just a hard worker and did, you know, made the right play, stayed at home, did what he was supposed to keep the puck out of his net, and did enough to play over 700 games in the NHL. And there aren't many people who get to say that they played over 700 games in the NHL. He was a very good hockey player, and you know, certainly was wanted as a veteran presence towards the end of his career, which is why these teams traded for him and wanted to bring them in for their playoff runs. But anyway, that's it for Tim Gleason. He was a stay-at-home guy, not a flashy player by any stretch of the imagination, but still a very solid NHL player. I remember him mostly. Well, I remember him everywhere except LA. I did not know that he played for the LA Kings or broke into the league with the LA Kings. I remember him from Carolina. I remember him in Toronto, and I remember him with Washington. But certainly mostly think of the Carolina Hurricanes when I think of Tim Gleason, because that's where he spent a large majority of his career. So that's it for episode 3 of NHL Remember Him. Do you remember Tim Gleason? I certainly do. Solid stay-at-home defenseman. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media, check out offthewallhockey.com. All those links are in the description down below. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll talk to you guys soon.